Hey folks, it's Nate. It's time I got back to the drawing board, and tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the face of Comicsgate. And by that I mean more like the landscape of Comicsgate, as opposed to, a figurehead or a charismatic leader or anything like that. I think there's enough people um, bickering about things like that, or there has been in the past. I'm more interested in where things are going. And I've said before that I kind of look at Comicsgate as a bunch of people who all came out of mainstream comics about the same time. And they came out for different reasons. They were all looking for different things. And a lot of people are trying to meet those needs now. I have no problems with any of that stuff. I think it's pretty great, actually. But people are also going about it in different ways and with different business models. And I think it's interesting to look at those and kind of think about them and what they mean for comics as a whole going forward. There's basically three business models that I see at work right now. Um, and I guess I'll just go over them in order and say what I think about them and how sustainable they are. The first and probably most popular business model is the Zach method. You set up a strong social media presence, usually revolving around YouTube, and you sell books on Indiegogo. And it's a good, solid method. There's a reason it worked and continues to work so well. It gives you strong audience engagement. It leaves you very free and flexible since you're using crowdfunding and doing most of the fulfillment work yourself. It is very easy to stay. Let me walk that back. It gives you a lot of control over the details, over the tone, over the attitude. You basically get to set the tone for everything from top down because you're the one in charge, and that's really great for artists. Zach has run this to good effect. Of course, Ethan Van Sciver has run it to amazing effect. John Malin and Mike S. Miller all doing very well on the Zach model, and it has a lot of things that make it appealing both to the audience and to the person who is working under it. And most of these people are very creative types. They like to be flexible. They like to, be able to do what they want. They don't like a lot of oversight or editorial control. If you're familiar with some of Ethan's earlier streams, he talked a lot about, how he felt kind of constricted working at DC, especially in the last couple of years he was there. He didn't get a whole lot of creative input. He was just given work to do, rarely, even doing entire storylines himself. It didn't feel good. It's not great when you're an artist to have a lot of stuff dictated to you. Most creative types don't like that. And I completely understand it. And so working independently, it gives you that freedom, that flexibility. You can do whatever you want. You can collaborate with whoever you want. The only vetting that you have to put them through is yourself. That's really great. It's really appealing. And audiences love it because there's a large degree of interaction with creators. That's great for them. They love it because they can. It's a lot easier to be heard. Audiences overall are smaller in this kind of market, so it's easier to say to a creator, I don't like X that you've been doing, but Y really excites me, and I will keep coming back for that. It's a lot easier to be heard than it is, when Marvel has its market of, had its market of, hundreds of thousands of people. It's a lot harder to get through to editorial that, you don't like stories of X type, but you do like stories of Y type. And of course, that's been part of the problem for the last couple of years. Lots of people have had, lots of stories they didn't like, and no matter how much they talked up the ones they did like, they seem to go away to make room for more of the stories they didn't like, and that doesn't feel real good for the audience. However, there are also drawbacks to this model for both the creator and the artist. For the creator, your output is at the speed of you. And what I mean by that is, you look at someone like your boy Zach, who is working with multiple artists on multiple different books, and he still has a pretty slow output rate. I think we can expect 3, maybe at an absolute tops, 4 books written by him every year. And that's because he has to do a lot of this stuff himself. Shipping, fulfillment, all the logistics, all that other stuff falls on him, and that's rough. We've seen, we saw with Jawbreaker's Lost Souls how far he was put behind by having his deal with his publisher fall through, or depending on what the courts find, perhaps be maliciously meddled with, allegedly right now, and this has definitely made his life more difficult and harder for him to keep out a steady stream of content. And that kind of makes life not so good for the audience either, because you're stuck. If there's any kind of hiccup along that production line, things get very uncertain, and there's nothing else from that writer to look forward to. And you say, well, there's a bunch of other writers. Yes and no. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. So hold on to that idea. Right now, it's not so great for the audience, because if your lone creator is disrupted by circumstance or by competition interfering, whether above board or underhandedly, you can get left in the lurch, even if your production crew miscalculates. We saw this with Cyberfrog Blood Honey, which is very, very late. I mean, it's coming out now. I have no doubt that we'll start seeing pictures of it arriving on doorsteps coming soon. But to be straight up, Ethan has said he miscalculated badly, and that's going to happen. And when that happens, what happens to customers? Well, they're kind of in the lurch. Even if you get a refund, that was money that could have gone to another Kickstarter that ran at the same time and fulfilled on time, that now can't. And maybe you're missing out on something you would have really liked. That's not good for customers. It's not. And that's a danger of this model. Like, that's not a moral failing. It's not a, so many people are like, oh, this is a bad thing, that means the people involved are bad. No, it's just, it's a danger. It's a hazard. And it's something to be watched out for. And, the other thing for the audience, going back to the idea that if your favorite author isn't putting something out, what do you do? Well, yes, there are a lot of other projects, but some people, some parts of the audience, they just want, one thing. If you're very invested in, say, a sci-fi story, like maybe Cyberfrog, something with aliens and weird cyborg creatures and stuff like that, you're not going to go for something like Professor Geek's Tales from the Stacks, which is all horror comics. The branding is great. Each publisher has a strong brand. I think you're not going to mistake a Mike S. Miller comic for an Ethan Van Sciver comic in topic matter, art style, storytelling approach, any of them. But maybe people just want one kind of art, one kind of storytelling. How are they going to find it? I mean, there are independent discovery tools like IndieCron, but the basic ya boy Zach model doesn't really help with that. So there are advantages, there are disadvantages. I think the advantages are pretty good. I think the disadvantages are pretty notable. So what's Model 2? Model 2 is the old-timer model, or the indie model, if you prefer. And we see this in people like Timothy Lim or Doug TenNapel. People who have been doing independent comic books by hook or by crook for much longer than there has been a major exodus from the big two, going back, five, maybe even 10 years. And that they are different. They have, in many ways, adopted many of the best performing techniques of the Zach model, as they should. All businesses should adapt with the changing times. And when you see a competitor take up a new and successful practice, you should absolutely adopt that practice. But they already have distribution channels worked out. They already have a lot of experience. with crowdfunding. They already have incredible contacts in the printing industry, and in the case of someone like Doug, in animation and other forms of entertainment. They have networks already built up, especially on the business side of things, and they're not about to walk away from those networks just because there's a whole bunch of new customers that they do really want to serve. And that is great because they are already there's a lot less startup. There's a lot more confidence in them. If you look at how fast Timothy Lim is putting out books, it's really incredible. I mean, the guy is he must not sleep or something. And like artistically, they are good quality books. I mean, for his style. If you like his style, if you don't like his style, well, maybe they don't strike you as such good quality books. But from everything I've seen, they look great. As I've said before, I'm a Pole. I cannot pack every book. I cannot back every book. I can't afford it. So I'm not really familiar with Tim's body of work. Although I am planning to pick up Black Ops Part 1 and 2 when my next paycheck comes in. But they can really crank out good books. They have good connections. They're producing amazing quality stretch goals and things like that. And that's great for them because they can move quickly. They already have existing audiences they can tap and draw on to help boost the profile of their campaigns. They have a ton of connections they can use to ensure that people get high quality products in a very reasonable period of time. Props to them. They are doing great work. However, it's not, for starters, if you're a creator, you can't just wave your hand and say, I'm going to be and somebody who uses this model, because it requires a lot of legwork. They've already put in a ton of work. You can't just do a startup like that. Also, they are a little more beholden to their networks of connections. They're not as flexible. And that just happens. The more entrenched you get in doing a thing, the less flexible you are. It's not as appealing to creators. And if you really want to be one of those guys who goes everywhere and works with everyone, well, there's a limit to that. You will eventually hit a point where you can't work with everyone, because not everyone wants to work with everyone else. And if you want to stick with the people who you trust, who you already have deals worked out with, or good ways to work with each other worked out, you're going to lose some of that flexibility. And I guess if you intend to stay with one thing for any length of time, that's bound to happen. I'm sure we'll see it happen to your boy Zach and Ethan and John Malin and so forth. At the same time, it is convenient for creators to have people you can rely on, people who will pick up the slack if you're not doing 100% on any given day, people who will keep you accountable and kick you in the butt and say, you're spending too much time on your ash can or whatever. You just need to get this out. It's nice to have assistants. Like, I know that Doug has a number of people who work for him. I think he said, sometimes as many as 10. I don't know if that's, just his kids helping him pack books when he's fulfilling, or what. But he has at least Mr. Phillips, one paid assistant. So yeah, having that kind of network, huge plus for the creator. It's good for the audience because they get out work on a much more regular basis, much more consistent work. You know what you're getting when you sign up for a Doug book or a Tim Lim book. Now, you may not like what they offer, and that's fine. I mean, that's part of business. Some people do not have as broad appeal as other people, and Tim Lim in particular makes some books that are not going to appeal to very broad audiences. That's fine. He turns a profit on his books. More power to him. But if you have these guys, and they don't appeal to you, well, then you don't get the benefits of their strong network connections and so on. And they also, what's the best way to put this? They're entrenched enough that they sometimes they sometimes come off as abrasive, let's say. Maybe a little overconfident. Maybe overconfident is not the right word. Both Tim and Doug have excellent reasons to be very confident in their skills. They're kind of set in their ways. Let's say that. Yeah, they're very stubborn in the ways they can approach things, and why not? They have been successful for years, and they know what works for them. They know their audience, and they don't compromise their vision just to expand the audience, because they already have a sustainable audience. So for new incoming members of the audience, it can be a little off-putting sometimes. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that, to be perfectly honest. They have working models, and they are working to expand them, as they should, because they saw, again, a large number of people who were looking for something like what they had on offer. Kudos to them. But it is going to be a little bit different, I think, for both their incoming audience, however much of an audience they should attract, and for Doug and Tim themselves, because they're dealing with new people who are looking for comics for reasons other than the audience that they had already. Because the audience they had already, well, not all of them were looking to abandon mainstream comics, I'm sure, and some of them probably continue to read and enjoy mainstream comics as well as the independent work that Tim and Doug do. So this new audience, the Comicsgate audience, that is largely turning their back on mainstream comics, maybe they don't find exactly what they want with these people who are already entrenched. After all, they've been entrenched for a while, and those people hadn't joined their audience. There's probably reasons for that. I mean, one of those reasons may have been ignorance. They didn't know about Tim or Doug, and it's fine. But some of them may have never joined their audiences just because that's not what they were looking for. And now that they're on the outside looking around, and Doug and Tim come up with this, it may not be, and they're like, hey, you want to check this out? It may not be a good fit. So what's the third model? Well, the third model is the Mitch Breitweiser Allegiance Comics model. And that model is try and make an independent company that functions using many of the advertising and marketing techniques perfected in the Zach model, but uses more traditional publishing methods of business and finance and staffing and contracting and stuff like that. And this model, I think, is probably where most people are going to wind up settling sooner or later. I think it's got the most staying power of anything we've seen so far. Simply because if you're trying to run a business on the internet and you're trying to do it by being a personality, you cannot use your fans as your staff. That's why you never see successful big-time YouTube or Twitch streamers who have fans as moderators in their chats, for example. That always ends badly. And I think the big reason is because your fans, if you're a creator, your fans are your boss. And if you have a moderator, well, the moderator works for you. You cannot have your boss also work for you. It just doesn't work out 99 times out of 100. There's probably some corner case that someone can think of as totally proves me wrong and yada yada. But by and large, that's not going to work. And at the same time, having a imprint, a brand, something like Allegiance Comics says, hey, we're working to make this kind of a story with this kind of production values and this kind of storytelling. So if a person wants a specific kind of a story, If you like Red Rooster, odds are you're going to like a lot of, so at least a chunk of the other stuff that Allegiance is going to put out. And so that really helps those people who just, they have that thing they want. And maybe they don't even have the free time to go all over Indiecron or something like that to find it. And it keeps things more regular. There are more people than just the Brightwisers under the Allegiance Comics banner. And they are all working together. They even share office space, so they can kind of help each other pick up slack and fill in if there's medical problems or some other kind of emergency. That's really good stuff, and we're only really seeing it from Allegiance Comics right now. And as much as I am just a guy here at my drawing board, making pictures and hoping to one day make my own comic, I recognize that this kind of a model is probably going to be necessary for the long-term health of independent comics. So yeah, I follow the Brightwisers. I would recommend that if you want to make independent comics too, you follow the Brightwisers. There's a lot of good information, a lot of good lessons there that go beyond just the basics of self-promotion and self-marketing, which is important, very important, yes. But there are things beyond that, and it's good to see that people are starting to think about it. Anyway, that's all I got for today. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, there's a like button and a subscribe button down below. Use them as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.